Yes, next episode we have the tale of apartment 214, and this one's real quick. We can go through this real fast. Basically, there's a ghost in apartment 214. This child, along with her mother, who had just gotten a divorce, moved into a pretty run-down little apartment because it was all she could afford after the divorce and all that. Moved into apartment 213. The ghost is basically opening the door, inviting her in to 214. Turns out it's just a little old lady, and they become fast friends. The ghost asks her to please be with her on a specific day. Turns out it's the day that she had died. Mm-hmm. But even though she had promised that she would, then some events came up and she wasn't there. So she broke her promise. That pissed the ghost off. The ghost does all these ghostly things, like shutting down all the power, popping up in apartment 213, just scaring the life out of her. And she's saying she's sorry. She's sorry that she failed to honor their promise. And long story short, is in a way of apologizing to her because what the ghost just wanted was to not be lonely anymore. That's all that the ghost wanted, was to not be lonely anymore. She and her mother move into apartment 214, which, because of the whole ghost situation, it's a bigger apartment at the end that costs less.
Because it's haunted.
Because it's haunted. As a result, the ghost is no longer having to be lonely ever again because it's a happy family situation. They just became a found family. It's a very cute, short little story.
Oh, that's nice.
Yeah, it's a found family situation. And the mother does not know that this ghost is here. Like, only the little girl is aware of the ghost. The mom is just blissfully unaware.
So how did she get convince the mom to move in 214? Because it was cheaper?
Yeah.
So that's not, okay.
Pretty much just it. It's just like...
I thought the mom knew. Okay.
No.
Just the girl.
Just enough detail was allowed to be known that the reason why this apartment was cheaper was because it was haunted, and the mother doesn't believe in ghosts, mind you. So
she was like, yeah, okay, whatever. It's a cheaper apartment.
It's a cheaper apartment, and it's bigger. It's got 2 bedrooms as opposed to 1.
Oh, yeah, I'm taking that.
And
it's a friendly ghost. Well, she don't know that.
But because the daughter and the ghost are now good friends, it just all works her out. It's very nice, roundabout, very simple, very fast. It doesn't take a whole lot of explaining.
The mom has absolutely no idea that they're living with a ghost.
Yeah. It doesn't matter, though.
No.
Because as long as at least one of them is there on the day of her death or something like that,
she's fine.
It's going to be fine. No big deal. End of story. Now, the next one, this is another one of those one where atmosphere is the thing that works the best in its favor. It's called The Tale of Watcher's Woods. The Watcher is almost not at all present throughout the entire story, so meh on that. I know. And the ghosts are actually, this is a camper story is what this one is. And the ghosts are 3 elder women who 75 years prior were campers at the camp that these 2 girls are currently attending at this time.
Okay.
They were tricked into Watcher's Woods by the Watcher, and the Watcher says that he would only give them back their souls and their ability to leave Watcher's Woods if they ever find their whistles. Well, their whistles were found after these girls had gone disappearing 75 years prior, and are hung up in a glass case as a constant reminder of what happens to not go out there into those Watcher's Woods, whatever. A camp story, also a camp horror thing, like don't go getting yourself out there in the woods without prior notice, something like that, you know?
Yeah.
Well, they do, because they ventured too far out into the woods. Both the little girls from 75 years prior and these 2 girls in the future, because they were going out. And this is one of those situations where, and I don't know why they did this constantly throughout this particular era, but it's always one kid, usually a girl, who's just hateful for no reason.
Yeah.
Another one who's just sweetheart. And they're paired together for some sort of like travel something. And for whatever reason, you got the snooty one, the nice one. The snooty one gets caught. The nice one also technically gets caught, but because she's more trustworthy, she's allowed by the 3 elder ghosts to go and get those whistles. She comes back with the promise that she would, gives them their whistles. They blow their whistles. They are freed from Watcher and his woods. Their souls are free. Then they exit. The 2 modern day girls exit out of the woods, free to go. Atmosphere is what this episode is best at.
Okay.
The setting, the atmosphere, this haunted campsite that the 3 ghost women had set up all those years prior.
So did the modern girls never see the Watcher?
They did, but only for a brief moment. Like I said, he only barely appears in this episode. It's annoying.
Yeah, because it's called the Watcher's Wood. You would think they would see him a little more.
He's more like a forest spirit with the way he appears, because he'll pop up and he's like covered in vines and leaves and all this stuff. Like he's like an evil forest spirit or something.
Okay.
I don't know. The episode in and of itself is not that strong. the atmosphere of the episode is what works in its favor, so it's memorable. Hence the reason why I'm able to recount it. That doesn't mean that the episode is great, but it's very popular amongst many people who list rankings of these episodes. So it's not a bad episode, just not a great episode. This next one, this is an interesting one. It's called The Tale of the Doll Maker. And contrary to its name, there is no actual doll maker person ghost. Instead, what happened is some years prior, this girl and her family gets a hold of a small, well, not small, it's a decent sized dollhouse that's up in the attic for the little girl to play with. And the house is the doll maker of this thing. It has created a portal between its front door and a door that's up in the attic that would lead out to normally a window that would view out into the yard of the big house. Okay. This dollhouse and the regular house are portals back and forth, and that portal only appears at certain periods of time. The girl who was living there in the house went through that door. The door closed on her, locked her into the dollhouse. Her parents, this is another one of those situations where parents can't find the kids. Situation like the Lonely Ghost episode from previously. Yeah. They can't bear to stay in a house where their daughter has just up and disappeared entirely. So they move. And we come back to the modern day where this girl has come to visit her aunt and uncle, and they are neighbors to the girl whose parents had just left out of sadness. And they're trying everything in their power to keep her out of her friend's house because they don't want her to go disappearing too. Understandable. Yeah. Well, she figures out that about this portal situation. She goes in there, she finds her friend who has gradually been turning into a doll. The longer she's there, the more she's going to gradually turn into a doll. Okay. And the same is true for this other girl, the friend who went in there. And she finds her friend. She manages to get her out, which at this point she is turning into a ceramic doll. Both of them are. But she manages to get her out, gets both of them saved out of that situation. They get out of that house. Then they go back and the uncle of the girl that's visiting takes that house and destroys it. So that portal the dollhouse, so the portal is no longer open and available. So it has a good roundabout finish on there to make sure that it doesn't happen again. And they of course contact her parents and say, we found her, you know? Yeah. So all is well that ends well on that. That's a pretty quick little rundown of the events taking place in this episode. But
so not a lot of time passed?
No, not really. Like the time frame between when the girl disappeared and when her friend shows up is maybe a few months in between. Okay. And thankfully she just hadn't fully turned into a doll, because they basically make it out to be where if you are in there for too long and you turn completely into a doll, there is no getting you back to normal. Yeah. You turn to a doll, you're done. Okay. So she is almost entirely a doll at this point. She's ceramic. Most of her face is ceramic. She literally brings her hand up and pulls the hand off to show that she has turned to a ceramic doll and puts it back on. Like,
but she can still talk.
She can still talk, but just barely. Like, she can barely eke out a few words at a time.
So, okay.
Yeah. It's a great episode atmospherically. It's a really solid setup, and it's a memorable episode and becomes a popular one amongst many for a reason. Okay. It's an episode definitely worth watching.
Seems good.
Is it like super strong? No. Does it have great follow through the whole way through though? Yes. Because everything finishes out beautifully. And even though the niece of the neighbors tells them it's the dollhouse, they aren't going to believe that right away because it sounds ridiculous. It's one of those pretend things. I just want to believe that my friend is safe and whatnot. So she's making believe, which is frustrating there at that time, but understandable at the same time. The episode is great. Really, it is. So it's memorable for a reason. And then we got The Tale of the Bookish Babysitter. And this is another one of those episodes where it's memorable for what it does atmospherically, but the acting is atrocious. Holy cow, is the acting atrocious, particularly by the main kid actor. You can tell he had never acted before in his life prior to that. What it is a case where you've got this babysitter who is a witch of some kind. She's spelled these storybooks. She's trying to convince more kids to read. So it's all a good thing. And by doing so, when a kid starts reading a story, the events in the books are going to start happening in real life. And he's got to read through the entire book in order to be able to finish it. But he'll start reading a book. He'll get through a sentence or two and he says, nope, this is boring. I'm not interested in this. Problem being is that once he started a story, it has to be finished. Yeah. But because he starts multiple stories, he confuses multiple stories, which causes multiple villains to all take place all at the same time. He's got to basically complete all of them now in a very short period of time. So, and
So
then he
instead of
wanted
just
to,
reading one book and finishing it, you don't cause a whole problem with several books. Now you
Yes.
still got to go back and read them.
yes, and because the events are now taking place in real life, he's now got to complete A Knight's Tale, some sort of witch's story, and a ghost's tale all at the same time. And now all of these details are all mixing together and they're all getting confused, but they're all meshing together into one collective story. And the result of all of this is that the witch, babysitter, bookkeeper, whatever she is, because of how these events are taking place, she's got another book off to the side that's allowing her to keep track of how things are going throughout everything and the way things are getting confused. But it's also telling this kid's story now in this book. So this events in this book are all taking place.
Creating another book.
It's creating another book the entire time. So she's continually creating more and more books.
So his fuck up has become a book for someone else to possibly read.
Yes.
Okay.
So it's an interesting story. It's not a great episode, particularly because the acting is not great.
Which sucks because like
But
acting
the
can
idea
make
is
and break. It can make and break a story.
And it does, unfortunately, with this one. It's still a good episode. I think the reason why I have it on here, and the reason why I have some of these on here anyway, excuse me, is because the idea is there. The execution
was lacking.
Falters. But if you look at it for what the idea is there, there's something going on there that's really worth looking at.
Okay.
So it's a good episode. It's just the elements are better than the final outcome.
Okay. I get it.
This is another one where I have it on here really because atmosphere was everything. This is the Tale of the Guardian's Curse. And this is one about a mummy inside of a museum.
Okay.
You got it. And it's a mummy's curse situation thing. The kids are the son and daughter of a archaeologist or something to that effect who works in that museum. It's a big, beautiful museum. It looks kind of like the Smithsonian almost. Maybe they did use the Smithsonian for this. I can't pronounce that.
Smithsonian?
Thank you. And I don't know. It's a beautiful museum. Very perfect setting for a haunted situation because a haunted museum is an incredible setup. The kids happen upon an important element that is tied to these tablets about the story of the mummy, as you would. And the museum director is actually a bad guy. He's trying to get all this stuff so that he can gain eternal life, which is tied to the events of this mummy, which is why he wants all this.
Okay.
The mummy comes back to life because they accidentally spilled a little bit of that life revival essence on the mummy by accident. The kids do. But there's actually two parts to it. There's the essence that will provide eternal life. And I think it's some sort of a locket or some sort of a necklace or something that will provide eternal youth. Well, the result of eternal youth is that the museum director winds up getting petrified by the end of it.
Because you can't change. So eternal youth, you're stuck.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. Oh, yeah. So it's kind of like a genie. You got to be careful what you ask for.
Yeah, basically.
Like, be specific.
Yeah. Well, he needed both parts in order to be able to get both. And he didn't have the other. He didn't have the essence.
So he's had the eternal youth, but that turned him petrified. So if he had the essence, he wouldn't have been petrified.
Yep.
Oh, okay.
Yep. And then the mummy winds up coming back to life. And I don't know, because I don't think they really explained it very well, if she just returned to ghost and showed her beautiful original self in that moment, or if maybe she gains all the years of the man who wore the locket and just came back to life and was now beautiful and her original self prior to being mummified. I don't know. It's one of those cases where they did a transition situation where she goes from being mummy to beautiful original self. So you don't really know what happened.
So it just ends with her being a human, sort of?
Yeah. And they kind of leave it ambiguous at the end where maybe she starts dating the father. I don't know.
Well, how are you going to explain the mummy disappearing?
Yeah, exactly. Well, the thing of it is that this was a very recent discovery, so it wasn't made public at the time. So all they would have to do is just avoid making too much things public.
Or get rid of the documentation that already said that the mummy was there.
Yeah, that too. Which is probably not that hard to do if you really think about it, if you're in a high enough position. So
yeah.
It's one of those cases where haunted museum, that's a great setting anyway.
Yeah.
And it's a story that's been done, but it's a story that if it's done right and it's done well, then it's really good. So can't complain. Good episode. Acting's not terrible. Setting's right. It's one of those episodes that I think it kind of needed to be a little longer. We're now starting to get it to a point where we are in season 3, and we're now getting to that point where it needed to be a little longer to fully flesh everything out.
Oh, okay.
So Like, it really started getting there at seasons 4 and 5, where they had stories that deserved to be fleshed out more in order to be at their best, but was solid in its own right for what it did in 20-something minutes.
Okay.
So we're at that point now. We're moving on to what is now considered, again, one of the very best episodes. And I would argue, honestly, easily amongst the very best episodes.
Okay.
By far. It is The Tale of the Dream Girl.
Episode
number is season 3, episode 10. With this episode, what you have going on is you've got a girl and her brother. They both work at their local bowling alley.
Okay.
You've got a girl in the background who is staring at the boy. He's like, oh, she's into me. She is. The girl, the sister, is like, who? Oh, her? Oh, well, I mean, okay. So the acting in this is phenomenal.
That episode?
Yes, the acting in this episode is absolutely phenomenal. The story beats are perfect. The way they tell it is perfect. We get to a certain point where the girl starts calling the boy. And that's about, I want to say midway through or so.
Yeah.
Maybe a third of the way through the episode. And she's calling him. He finds her, prior to all these calls, he finds her locket or something in his locker, or her jacket. It's her jacket.
Okay.
Finds her jacket in his locker, and she calls him and says, you have my jacket. Because she's persistent, he finally talks to her and says, I don't know why you keep bothering me. I'll return your jacket. Just leave me alone. So she says, okay, I'll leave you alone. And so they do a little bit more research, or rather it's the sister that did a little bit more research, if you will, or rather she didn't have to. We're getting into that here in a moment. She shows to her brother that the girl is dead. She had died in a train accident where their car had stopped on train tracks, and she went back to get her jacket, and the train came barreling and killed her.
Okay.
So she's dead. He's basically being tricked into this situation with this ghost girl. They wind up in a situation where at night, where the bowling alley is closed down, then there's basically like a night shift, which is a bunch of ghosts. He shows up there around midnight. They dance for a little bit. They spend some time together. And then I think it's at that point that he says, we need to stop this. And she's like, okay, I'll leave you alone. Well, it's at that point, shortly thereafter, that the sister reveals that there is something that she was withholding from him all this time. And that's that he's also a ghost. They both died. He went back for her in order to stop her, and they both got hit by the train. What had happened was that when he showed back up, he didn't seem to remember anything. He has total amnesia of this entire event having ever taken place, and they were dating. The ghost girl and him, they were dating. They were together, and the girl, the sister, just pretended like nothing was going on because he didn't seem to remember anything. And she was happy having her brother back. And mind you, this is one of those rare situations where the brother and sister get along fantastically.
Okay.
They are best friends. Along with just being siblings, they are best friends.
Okay.
So to have her brother back, who she loved and missed so much, was wonderful. And something that they do so supremely well from the start with this episode is that the mother, she is struggling to make ends meet. She's a single mother. She's got a whole bunch of bills now. We know why, because of all the hospital expenses and whatnot. Presumably they died in the hospital and whatnot.
Yeah.
Amongst other regular everyday bills and stuff like that. And her daughter, the sister, whatever, is very independent. And because of the way that they write it, it just seems like the mother is so busy that she's just not answering the brother's questions, statements, stuff like that when he's talking to her. She doesn't know he's there.
Yeah.
All this while, she doesn't know that he's there, but it's played off like the mother is just so busy, she doesn't have time to stop. With that, everything just comes full circle, and the acting is so good because the sister starts crying. She's like, you didn't remember, and I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to tell you. I didn't want to bring it up because I was so happy. And then they finally go over back to the grave site where they were both buried side by side.
Oh.
Yes, they were buried side by side. She meets up with him, and they walk off happy, and it's so
basically
beautiful.
She didn't really go because he didn't go, but that's because he didn't remember.
Yes, exactly.
Okay.
She didn't go because they were happily in love together, and because he didn't remember, she had to wait for him to remember. So she stayed,
yeah.
Yep.
Well, if you like stuff like that, watch this.
The Others?
Watch it.
Okay.
Because literally what you were saying, I was like, okay, if he likes that type of... Because when I tell you, I watched that movie, granted, I probably shouldn't have been at the time, on repeat at one time. Like, My family, they was like, "Are you still watching the movie?" I'm like, "Yes." I stayed in the room and just watched it over and over and over and over again. I don't know what was going on. But
your mom likes to play the same movie on repeat, though, doesn't she?
The series that she be watching, yeah, like these oldies. But no, I was watching that movie over and over. I did not come out of the room. I just watched it over and over and over again. Because when I tell you, the first time I watched it, it was kind of like, what the heck just happened? And then I just kept watching it, and I was like, okay, it's not that scary. It's more psychological than scary. Is what that. So like once you watch it, you just like. The first time I watched it, I was like, are you serious? That's what, like, it was like that. Yeah. So that was reminding me so much of this. So I think you would like the others if you find it. I don't know what you would be able to watch it on.
It's on Max.
Max?
Yeah. Well, that's what's just so fantastic about this episode. It hits these story beats. It never says anything until it gets to the right point in which to actually bring it up. So all this while, you have no idea that the ghost girl is a ghost girl, or that the boy is also a ghost, until it's finally just stated outright. But that's so to its advantage the entire time.
I know. That's something I think you're like, since you like that, like this, the others, you can watch it on Google and Amazon Prime.
Okay. Well,
you would like the others. So put that
this episode will make you cry.
Well, yeah, this is sad in general. Well, that's what I'm saying. Well, if you cried over that episode, you probably want to cry over the others. You probably cry a little bit over the others because it's sad. Once you get like the end, you're just like, that's fucked up. But the whole time you're just like, and at the end you go, wait a minute, shit, I was rooting for the wrong person. Like that's literally how it is. Like you're just like, oh man, I didn't. Yeah. So it's sad, but it's a good movie. It was in 2001. So. Yeah.
I mean, the thing of it is that there is no bad guy in this episode. It's literally just love that has lasted beyond death, and it's so well done.
Yeah, so if you can find this, I think you like that one. Because, I mean, there's a bad guy, though, in this one. But the whole time you're watching, you're just like, oh, shoot. Oh, that's what happened. Like, it's trippy how they do it. It's really good. It was a really good movie. So,
and they did all this in 20 minutes for the Dream Girl. 20 minutes.
Yeah.
Well, 23. But 20 minutes is all it took for them to tell a beautiful, tightly woven love story that crossed dimensions in life and death.
Yeah.
And it was so beautifully executed. And then the acting, everything you needed for it to be phenomenal.
I don't think you'd be upset. There are children. I don't think you'd be upset with the children in this one. So their acting was pretty good.
Yeah. Then the Tale of the Quicksilver. And this one actually has both a good spirit and a bad spirit. And you've got a case where twin sisters were living in a house. One of them gets sick by the evil spirit. She tries to do this ritual in order to capture the evil spirit, does it wrong, winds up dying as a result, being captured by the evil spirit. The rest of the family moves out of sadness, shocking surprise. A new family moves in, and history is repeating itself. The brothers have moved into the same room that was originally the room of the twin sisters. The younger brother gets sick, and they have to finally complete this ritual in order to be able to capture the evil spirit. It's all brought on by the elder brother having a dream about the twin girl that died, saying, turning to him and saying, I did it wrong. I did the ritual wrong. And because he recognizes the girl as someone who he attends school with, that's what leads to her telling him about her twin sister.
Yeah.
And it ends with, obviously, the twin sister is not coming back to life. She's dead. There's no fixing that one, which is rare anymore. It seems like there's always that undoing death thing with a lot of modern stories and stuff.
Yeah.
So I'm glad they don't do that with this. It's simple. And there's some level of confusion in there because there's a quick mention of a story or of a ghost called a Quicksilver, which is hence the title of this one. The Quicksilver is a messenger. Anytime they're arriving there to leave a message to try to get someone's attention so they can understand what's happening, a cue will appear wherever they were in that room, somewhere in that room, to give indication of it. And I don't know if there's any truth behind that in terms of like lore or anything like that. It's probably just something they just completely fabricated for this story, but it works really well. But it caused some confusion because then there's some thought that the Quicksilver is bad. It's the bad character, the bad ghost, but it's actually the good ghost.
Yeah. Like, I'm just the messenger, basically.
Yeah. It's a simple story. It's a simple story of we've got to capture this evil spirit so that my younger brother can finally get well and not wind up in the same situation that your twin sister wound up in.
Yeah.
It's a good story. It follows through nicely. Most of it takes place in the one kid's bedroom. it's a good story. I mean, there's not much more to say about it, really. That's pretty much start to finish it.
Oh, okay.
It's simple, but it didn't need to be complex in order to be good.
Yeah.
And I think that's kind of why I have it on here, is because it was so simple that it did what it needed to effectively.
That sounds like a good way to run it up.
Yeah.